This is Doppo Orochi demonstrating the insane brutality of his karate, landing a direct blow on his student where he actually kills him. At least that's what it would seem like. This is similar to what Musashi Miyamoto did back in the day, pretty much fake out deaths, or based on the imagination or view of those who receive the blows, they think they are actually dead. The reality is his opponent is just knocked out, highlighting that these two returning to the Baki story after all this time was just for the sake of using them as fodder to build up once again the likes of Baki Hanma and now Doppo Orochi more and more for their upcoming fights against the one and only biting cyborg Jack Hanma. But we do have some very interesting stuff to break down in Baki Rahen chapter 54, so if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe here on Mysterious Weeb for all the Baki content you need, of course, and let's get into it. So as many of you know, it's been a few weeks, you could say, since the latest Baki chapter. 53 came out and there was meant to be a 1 week, 2 week break. Then the chapters were delayed for another 2 weeks, but we finally have chapter 54, which provides a pretty good cover page of Doppo Orochi with the following caption: "You probably don't know about karate, about me," highlighting that not many people throughout the Baki world know the truth about Doppo Orochi and how he's pretty much top 3 most brutal characters in the entire series, particularly when going all out in a fight. Remember moments like this, which are actually cut from the recent anime seasons, just random moments of Doppo Orochi roaming the streets and just beating up people, ruining their lives forever. This one of course was deserved, but there's been other moments where bro is just the ultimate Baki goon. And you could say this is pretty much a definitive Baki moment, a definitive Baki chapter in a sense, with Katsumi bringing up that Doppo Orochi's karate isn't exactly competition friendly, and to be fair, that's pretty much an understatement. We have been getting a lot of shine from Doppo throughout Baki Dao and now even Baki Rahen, with a lot of it also featuring Katsumi in the same scene. So I'm wondering, are we going to see Katsumi actually demonstrate some stuff with his Retsu arm, as all we've seen to this day is that one match against a random sumo fodder where bro was pretty much going to kill his opponent, so he had to back out before something like that occurred. Yes, it's cool to see Doppo Orochi face that other sumo guy and now have this stuff sparring with Kaito and now Sudo, etc. But I'm still more excited to see Katsumi Orochi and his evolution throughout the story. With my recent top 10 strongest I released in short form, explaining or having Katsumi ranked 10th in the verse, with him already having surpassed his father, a common narrative point. However, the shine Doppo Orochi is getting cannot be ignored, that's for sure. And when coming to my official tier list I talk about in pretty much every Baki Rahen review video, these two, Sudo and Kaito, are not going to move. Yes, you can argue some wacky stuff, but even compared to the cord cutter and his recent performance against Doppo during their sparring match, and of course in his Jack fight, highlights that he's levels above these guys, and certified fodder. Extreme warriors of the E tier is where they will remain pretty much forever. We've got some shit talking between these two, where Doppo is beginning to get serious, enraged in a sense, and then as we see, one-shots his former student in a sense, as Doppo Orochi is technically retired and has been for quite some time, doing his own goonie activities. But as I mentioned at the start of today's video, I really enjoyed the brutal imagery of Doppo almost killing his student with this one blow, very similar to Musashi Miyamoto throughout his entire arc when the legendary samurai was landing his imagination slashes on all the people and had pretty much random characters getting mind broken due to the sensation and fear that they were already killed multiple times. This isn't exactly the same as Doppo did definitively defeat and knock out his student here, probably held back to some degree, where if he didn't he would have probably done this, which is absolutely wild. But this highlights to me that Doppo is more than ready for his upcoming Jack Hanma fight. However, you could say Itagaki doesn't really share the same view. We are continuing with Doppo's sparring matches or demonstrations right here, as that wasn't really enough to highlight what he's capable of. He's now having a 1v3 against these other karate students. Or you could say free fodder who are going to duel Doppo Orochi and get destroyed, similar to the previous. Once again, further build up for the karate master and his upcoming fight. Perhaps after he defeats these three, maybe he's going to have some type of sparring match with his son Katsumi as well. That would be pretty cool. But when it comes to their karate school, the only ones that are really relevant is Doppo and Katsumi at this point, as we just saw with how Kaito and Sudo have been done. Likely not to do anything when it comes to the future of Baki Rahen now. They've had their return, they've had their cool little moments, cool little returns with somewhat updated character designs, but that's it. Which brings us to the bad news, you could say. Baki Rahen will once again be on break next week. The next chapter, chapter 55, is scheduled to come out on November 20th. Naturally, this can change like it did recently. It can always change, but as it currently stands, that is the schedule, and this is pretty much the hint for the next chapter. All on his own, unable to see them all at once. He's at an overwhelming disadvantage. At least that's what you would think. If Doppo Orochi still had both eyes and could use this technique back from the Yujiro Hanma fight, that would be pretty sick and could very well give him an easy victory. However, as I've broken down in pretty much maybe 100 videos at this point, the current version of Doppo Orochi is by far the strongest version of him we've ever seen. The young Doppo we saw in the Yuichiro side manga, or I should say Doppo Orochi's side manga with that Yuichiro chapter, was weaker than any version we saw in the main series. We literally see him in the later chapters of that manga training, pretty much considering himself weak, etc. Then in Grappler Baki at the start when he faced Yujiro Hanma, that was a strong and I guess a version of Doppo that had more techniques in a sense. However, we get it confirmed during the Maximum Tournament, which is after the Doppo and Yujiro fight, that he had completed and evolved his karate to a further extent, with multiple confirmations that he's gotten stronger. Then during the little break before the Death Row Inmates arc, Doppo went on his training arc to evolve further again, confirmed in various character profile and additional stuff that he's gotten stronger. And then throughout the entire Baki story after that, we see him training progressively. Like most characters, everyone is currently at their peak, the strongest they've ever been in the story. Progression of power is a very real thing in the Baki world. Just need to restate this for those who still say random stuff about Doppo Orochi of the past being stronger than the current. That is not the case by any means. He is still a legend, and will likely put up a pretty legendary fight against Jack when that does begin. Hopefully sooner than later, as we have been, I guess, receiving quite slow output and progression of Baki Rahen, at least over the last 6 months you could say. So with that, I hope you enjoyed. Check out this playlist with all the Baki videos I've uploaded recently. You likely missed a lot of them. There's a short as well in the shorts feed where I break down the top 10 strongest of all time in the Baki story. Check that out, and yeah, latest boys.